Washington 37, Texas 31. Remember when we were previewing this game and I said, I think the country's initial reaction is, Texas, Washington, give me Texas. Talent roster, give me Texas. And then I said, a lot of the country is going to do a deeper dive on the game and they're going to go, uh-oh, matchup problem for Texas. Pass defense in the 90s, best pass offense in America. And then I said, there's a fine sliver of the college football public that will do a double deep dive, and they'll go, is Texas's secondary really that vulnerable? Weren't a lot of these passing yards put up in garbage time or in situations where teams were in catch-up mode? And to that I said, we'll find out. Well, friends, we found out. Padlock stats all over the place. Michael Penix was a padlock stat in this game. 29 of 38, 430 yards, 2 touchdowns. Washington had half a dozen guys with 3+ catches. Not last month, last night, just last night. They had half a dozen guys catch 3 balls or more. A Dunze went off, like all the usual suspects went off. They had 0 sacks, and it's not because Texas didn't get pressure. It's just because Michael Penix is kind of sort of a wizard. Does some things that shouldn't really be capable of being done on a football field. Unbelievable. You watched the game just like I did. 9 passes of 15+ yards. But here's what's even more impressive. Because sometimes if I got extreme talent at running back and wide receiver, I can toss the ball out in the flat and you guys can take it 25 yards downfield and it looks like I lit you up through the air when I didn't. Penix was 7 of 11 for 257 yards on passes that went 15 yards or more in the air. That is insanity. That is a video game stat line. You're not supposed to do that in week 3 against Portland State, much less against Texas. So it turns out Texas's pass D was that vulnerable. And it turns out Washington was more than ready to meet the challenge there. And that matchup advantage for Washington negated all the other edges Texas had. Remember, I don't know if it was last week or week before, we were doing this little exercise where I was talking about talent mattering, but talent being misinterpreted. So a lot of times people take talent to just mean, let me go to 247sports.com. There we go. Let me look up the team talent composite. All right, there it is. Oh, Texas is near the top and Washington's in the 20s or 30s. Ball game. That's not the way football games are played, though. There's nothing incorrect about those metrics. I believe in those metrics, but those are just a resource. That's just a guideline. That's not the rule of how a game plays out. Because matchups, styles in other words, dictate how fights go. And the style of this game really early on dictated that we've got racehorses at wide receiver here and you can't cover them. So it doesn't really matter if your tight end is better than ours. It doesn't matter if you have 2 or 3 corners that were 4-star or higher and we don't. You can't guard these guys. You can't touch our quarterback. The rest of it, as long as we just hold serve, as long as we're competitive, we'll be fine. That's how football games play out. That's how teams that don't recruit on your level necessarily can beat you. Washington, having said that, flirted with utter disaster in the 4th quarter. So I was leaving the Rose Bowl. I'm watching the game in the car. I have, of course, watched the entire thing since then on the flight home this morning, but I'm watching it live in the car. Just Gelby driving us through the back streets of Pasadena because Gelby is a SoCal native. Actually, Gelby's lived all over the world, but he currently resides in Southern California. That's as specific as I'd like to get about Gelby's location. But I'm watching the game. And then as we get back downtown to our hotel, I'm driving by bars and stuff, and you see 31-21 Washington. Uh-oh. Back up to the hotel room, 34-21, I believe it was. And then here comes Texas. And the way that 4th quarter unfolded, it was very interesting because this was not a game. Like if you look at 37-31 Washington, and you knew Texas was favored by 4.5, and you thought they had the talent edge and whatnot, you may think Washington must have found a way to sneak around and win this game. They must have just stayed within punching reach, and then all of a sudden they got them at the very end. No, No, Washington owned the game. It was Texas trying to sneak in the back door. It was Texas trying to do to Washington what several teams had to do to Texas this year. Texas got up big on some teams, and then they got back in the back door and they made it close, and it was Texas folks trying to convince you this game wasn't really as close as it looks. It's Washington today saying this game wasn't as close as it looks. They're right. They're right. Those points count, but they're right. Texas trailed by 9 points with 1:10 to go in this game, and they didn't recover an onside kick. Like, how in the world did they have multiple throws to the end zone to win it? Well, I thought, candidly, Washington made a terrible decision to throw the ball on third down, and then you have a freak occurrence where you have a running back get hurt in a portion of the game where, frankly, you could have been taking knees and leaving Texas with almost no time on the clock. And so you lose your best tailback, and that's not a factor in this game. It could be in the next game. But more importantly, Texas gets the ball with time to do something, even with no timeouts. And it was a nervous time. So much so that I had 2 tweets ready to fire off, because that's really what it comes down to. Is what are you going to say right when the game ends? So I had the koala with the mouth hanging open and the leaves hanging out of his mouth. I just needed to know which team's logo I was going to put on his chest there. It turned out to be a Washington Husky logo. I am, in a weird way, I'm glad that the game ended the way it did, even though I picked Texas, because Washington deserved to win the game. So I'm glad Washington did win the game. That throw to A.D. Mitchell, man, I did think 5 was going to end up making some kind of miraculous play for Texas, because that's all he's done his entire career. Washington just got their 10th straight win of 10 points or less, which is a record probably on this planet and every other planet. What can you say? The same thing I just said about Michigan, I could say about Washington. I've seen them in person twice this year, just the Oregon games. That's when 3 times. We went to the Oregon State game. Anytime Washington played a team from the state of Oregon, I was there this year. And there's an element about that team that's the same as Michigan. And it does not show up on paper, and it doesn't show up in a statistical model. But there is an intangible quality about teams that end up being the best at the end, and it's really hard to put your finger on. A lot of times, it's guys who have been together a while. It's really supremely good coaching staffs, but there is an intangible that you can feel when you're around them, and you see it in close games. Teams don't accidentally win 10 close games in a row. Never happens. And so Kalen DeBoer's got his team in the national championship game, and also in the last year of the 4-team playoff era, they are doing something that people claimed we needed an expanded playoff to see happen, which is like an Alanis Morissette level of ironic. But also, he's on the precipice of doing a lot of stuff that we've never seen done. And that's just in terms of overall talent roster makeup and what we thought was possible versus what wasn't possible in college football. But that's Washington's side. The Texas side. Remember early in the year, red zone was a big issue for Texas, okay? And we wondered aloud, in this game, will it be an issue for them? Well, it wasn't to start off with. Their first 4 opportunities in the red zone, touchdown, 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 touchdown. But they got down there the last 2 drives. I think, Jesse, I think they had 7 plays down there. And obviously, you saw how things worked out. But also, they had 10 penalties in this game. They had 2 second-half fumbles. Give Washington credit for those. But they had 2 second-half fumbles. And the story of the Texas season is where they're a team, when it clicked, you said, no one's beating them. I don't think anyone can beat them. But it didn't click enough. That wasn't the rule. The clicks were the exception. And the rule was it was a talented team with a lot of promise, but shot themselves in the foot a lot. And as a result, they couldn't take control of like the Kansas game. Well, not the Kansas game. What in the world am I thinking of? The Washington game last night. But also, if you look at their schedule this year, think about the Oklahoma game, which was their only blemish in the regular season. What happened? They got down in the red zone, couldn't take care of business. It's hard to do. It's hard to do that over a 12-game season. I don't care how soft you think someone's schedule is. It's hard to do. Florida State fans are steadily listening to this right now saying, oh, really? Going undefeated? That's a hard thing to do, huh? Yes, friends. I will address you a little bit later on. So we've got it now. We got Washington, Michigan. Whomst amongst us? Whomst have thunk it? Not me.